So I thought I'd do a year-end tier list for 2020 of the books I read. And so I read, I guess, kind of an eclectic mix of books. Uh, so I mostly read nonfiction, to be honest. But I will start here with the fiction books that I've read. So the first one I think I'm going to talk about. So let's just get this one out of the way. So the Kaisen Lu, the three body problem. So I guess to just get the elephant in the room out of the way here, we'll talk about the genocide problem, or his support for the Uyghur genocide in China. So there's this article in the New Yorker where they did an interview with him, and this has sort of made the rounds about this author. So uh, the first thing this is actually pretty far into the article here, but it says, when I brought up the mass internment of Muslim Uyghurs, around 1 million are now in re-education camps in the northwestern province of Xinjiang. He trotted out the familiar arguments of government-controlled media. Would you rather that they be hacking away at bodies at train stations and schools and terrorist attacks? If anything, the government is helping their economy in trying to lift them out of poverty. The answer duplicated government propaganda so exactly that I couldn't help asking Lou if he ever thought he might have been brainwashed. I know what you were thinking, he told me with weary clarity. What about individual liberty and freedom of governance? He sighed, as if exhausted by a debate going on in his head. But that's not what Chinese people care about. For ordinary folks, it's the cost of health care, real estate prices, their children's education, not democracy. I looked at him, studying his face. He blinked and continued. If you were to loosen up the country a bit, the consequences would be terrifying. I remembered a moment near the end of the trilogy when the Trisolarians prepared to inhabit Earth, have interned the whole of humanity in Australia. I'm not going to read the little excerpt here. Lou closed his eyes for a long moment and then said quietly, "This is why I don't like talking about subjects like this. The truth is, you don't really, can't truly understand." He gestured around him. "You lived here in the U.S. for what, going on 3 decades?" The implication was clear. Years in the West had brainwashed me. In that moment, in Lou's mind, I, with the inflexible sense of morality, was the alien. So anyway, you can read the whole interview in the New Yorker. I'll have that linked to in the description below. But I just thought I'd get that elephant in the room out of the way. Um, so, that's very disappointing to hear from an author, especially one who, if you read the book, seems to have a fair grasp of sort of, um, I guess, how bad that sort of fanaticism can be. The book Three Body Problem starts and sort of calls back to a lot of the Chinese Cultural Revolution, where a lot of especially younger people started sort of rising up and sort of taking uh, the politics into their own hands and holding these show trials. Forget what they called them. It'll come to me in a little while. But yeah, they you know they there was sort of a time of political fanaticism, and it ended with a lot of suffering, a lot of death, and it's always kind of weird when somebody who has that kind of self-awareness seems to lack it so much with sort of the current uh, political climate where they live. But if I'm going to just judge the book based on just the book itself, um, I think I'm probably going to put it B tier. No, I think I'll put it C tier. it was okay. I mean, I definitely liked, reading something that was from a different culture, but I don't know, there was just a lot of stuff with it that I just didn't really enjoy all that much. I mean, for one thing, like that three body problem video game thing that seemed like it was just sort of a shoehorned in way of doing exposition and didn't, I don't know, it was just kind of boring and didn't really seem to add a whole lot to the story. So I think C tier for that. Um, so, well, I'll go to the next one that I didn't like that much, which was Kim Stanley Robinson's Aurora. And I'm going to put that firmly in D tier. So I bought the book Aurora because it is, well, when I read the description on Amazon, it sounded very similar to a book or a manuscript that I've written that I'm currently querying uh, to uh, to literary agents. And so I thought, well, shit, I hope I didn't get scooped on this idea. So the idea in this book is that there is a small group of humans on this multi-generational interstellar spaceship heading towards another planet, and that's very much sort of the very broad basic idea of the book the manuscript I wrote that I'm querying. But then I bought the book and read it, and well, I don't know if I should be happy or not that. Well, for one thing, the book is sufficiently different from my manuscript, so that's a good thing. But I also just found Aurora to not be that great of a book. I don't know, it seemed like it was like reading an essay about the book Aurora rather than reading the book Aurora. There was just a lot of, sort of the author explaining things happening rather than actually having those things sort of playing out the way, the sort of show don't tell thing. It just seemed like there was a lot of, you know, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and, rather than actually having the story happen from sort of a point of view, it was sort of, up from like 1,000 miles above, just sort of telling what was going on in the story. And I don't know. Well, I got to be honest. It was DNF. I didn't finish Aurora. I got through maybe a third of it. I skimmed through maybe the next third, and then I just kind of went on Wikipedia and sort of read how it ended. But I don't know. It was just kind of boring to me, so I didn't finish it. So let's go to one that I actually enjoyed a little bit more. So Planetfall, so by Emma Newman. I'm gonna put that. I don't know. I feel like I'm being kind of hard on all these fiction books that I read, but I don't know. Planetfall, just sort of comparing it to fiction books I've read in the past. I think I have to put it B tier. I mean, it was probably of the fiction books that I put onto this list here, probably the best one I read. It seemed like it was a fairly original idea. I mean, once again, and you can probably see the sort of theme here. I bought it because, once again, it sounded a little bit similar to the manuscript that I have written and am querying to literary agents. So it was a small group of people who flew to another planet. And so in this book, so it's a bit different than my manuscript, which takes place fully on the multi-generational ship, which is also different from the from Robinson's book Aurora. But Planetfall takes place pretty much completely on the planet, on their destination planet. And it follows the protagonist, this woman named Ren, and they're on this planet. And one of the ideas I really liked was that they used sort of like organic material or biological material to like grow their buildings and furniture and things like that, which I thought was a really neat idea. And uh, well, I don't want to spoil it too much. It definitely seemed like a little bit more of a character-driven novel because the story was just, it was all right. It wasn't anything, amazing, but the character work was really good. And there was good atmosphere to it and everything. So I liked that about it. So I think this is the penultimate fiction book on my list here. Neal Stephenson's Fall. I think I'll put that in C tier as well. So I really like Neal Stephenson. He writes books that are at least sort of the style of science fiction that I tend to write as well, more hard science fiction. So I really, really liked Neal Stephenson's book Seven Eves. I think that was probably my favorite of his books. Uh, Fall, not so much. There was a lot of really good ideas in it. There were a lot of things that I definitely enjoyed, but so it kind of takes place between sort of the real world and then this sort of I guess for lack of a better analogy, matrix type world where the uploaded consciousness of dead people can live. And so the book kind of, as it goes on, more and more of the people in the real world are dying and having their consciousness uploaded. And by the end of the book, it becomes essentially just a fantasy quest kind of book, because this world where the consciousnesses are uploaded is essentially a fantasy type world where there's magic and gods and things like that. And I don't know, I found myself enjoying the stuff outside of the uploaded world, the stuff in the real world, more than the stuff in the uploaded world. So it was a little bit disappointing when it turned out that everything was just sort of moving towards the end of the book, where it just turned into kind of a fantasy novel, which I like fantasy novels. I'm not against fantasy novels, but just I guess it wasn't what I was hoping for. And I don't know, it felt like the stakes weren't really that high, and I don't know. I just kind of didn't care about what was going on in the computer simulation fantasy world. So yeah. So the last fiction book I have on here is Incarnate, Schism, and I am definitely going to put that in S tier because it was written by me, and it came out last year in 2020, so I'm going to shamelessly promote my own fiction book. So it is the third in my Incarnate series, about, I guess you could call them a being, a person who is reincarnated every time they die, and they've lived through all of human history. The first book starts in roughly modern times, and then as the books go on, it goes further and further into the future, becoming more and more science fiction. So I'm not going to dwell on that too much, because I said that I'm shamelessly promoting it, but I always feel a little shame promoting myself. So now let's get into some of the nonfiction books that I read. So I will start, I guess, with the history books that I've read. So I read this book that's sort of a very broad overview of the history of China, uh, which um, which I thought was pretty good. I think I'm going to put that in A tier. Who was that by again? John Keay. I don't know how to pronounce that. Keay. But so I don't know that much about the history of China. I mean, I'm not like a history expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I guess, being, somebody from the West, it's mostly sort of Western, sort of European and American history where if I can be said to know anything about history at all, that's where my knowledge lies. And so, sort of this last year, I've kind of tried to get a little bit more in broadening my horizons and looking at sort of Eastern history. So places like China. I bought also some books on the history of Japan and India that I have not gotten around to reading yet, but I'm hoping to get to those sometime soon. And so this, I think, was a really good introduction for someone like me who doesn't know that much about the history in the East and places like China. And so if you are like me and you don't know that much about it, then this book, I think, would be a really good place to, a good jumping off point. It goes through sort of the entire history of Chinese civilization from back in like the like even before like the Zhou dynasty and places like that in the like thousands BC, and goes all the way up through pretty modern times, sort of 20th century China under Mao Zedong and stuff like that. So and it gives it's a very, like I said, it's a very high level history of it. It gives a little. It kind of goes through some of the more, I guess, notable things in each dynasty, and he sort of talks about how each dynasty sort of came to power, and then sort of what happened as they sort of declined out of power and things like that, and gives little anecdotes about sort of key figures and stuff like that. So if you are interested in getting more into the history of places like China, then I would recommend this book. So the ones that I have, so I have one that's on India that's by the same author. I don't know if you can see it on the camera, it's up there. And then I have another one that's on the history of Japan that I don't believe is by the same author, but so the India one is by this same author. I have not read that one yet, but that is on my to be read list. I guess sort of in the same vein, so there is this book, The Wars for Asia, 1911 to 1949, and that is by S.C.M. Paine. I'm going to put that in A tier as well. That's another. It's a really good one. So it's about the early 20th century China. So it goes into the sort of the fall of the last empire and sort of the civil war that results between the communists and the nationalists. So the communists who ultimately ended up under Mao Zedong, and the nationalists who were mostly led by Chiang Kai-shek. And then it goes into sort of how the war with Japan started, and how there was the sort of on again, off again strained alliance between the nationalists and the communists as they tried to fight Japan, and then it goes through the whole war with Japan and sort of beyond that. So it says it goes to 1949, which is when the communists emerged victorious in China over the nationalists. So, and it goes into a lot of sort of military and economic, the military strategies and economics and stuff like that, and how all that led to the various outcomes that occurred. For instance, why Japan invaded China in the first place, and then why Japan failed to conquer all of China, uh, and then why the nationalists ultimately failed to stave off the communists, even though for most of that time between 1911 and 1949, the communists were the ones who were sort of the ones who, if you were a betting person, that you would think they would be the ones that would lose. So it's a very interesting book, and I enjoyed it. So the other history that I have on here is the 30 Years' War. I believe I'm going to put that in B tier. I forget who that was by. I can't really read it on there. I'll have links in the description down below to all of these. But yeah, it was a good book. I mean, it's extremely long, and it's one that seems like it's sort of aimed towards people who already know a little something about uh, sort of uh, sort of the 16th and 17th century European history. And so I don't know that much about that history. So once again, like I said, I'm not a history expert by any stretch of the imagination, but most of my history knowledge is probably 20th century history, particularly the time between the 1914 and 1945. So the two world wars and the interwar period is kind of where my expertise would be. And so I was interested in the 30 Years' War because it's talked about quite a bit. The particularly like the Second World War is sometimes compared to the 30 Years' War, because the 30 Years' War is known as this long slogging war filled with atrocities, and uh, so that's why I bought this book and read it. I mean, I don't have any big complaints about the book. Uh, it covers the entire war, and it covers it in quite a bit of detail. Uh, like I said, if I was somebody who had probably already known quite a bit about the stuff happening in this era, I'd probably increase the rank on it. But being that I'm very much a novice in this particular part of world history in general, well, world history at all, then this book, I'm rating it a little bit lower just because it probably wasn't meant for an audience like me who is kind of going into this somewhat blind. But um, I'm definitely going to keep it as a sort of a high B, because I mean it's a really well written book, and it's definitely something that if you already have at least sort of a baseline knowledge of particularly 16th century European history, then this book is probably something that you would very much enjoy. So now I'm going to quickly go through some of these. I think I'll start with this one. So this is getting more into philosophy. So this is Cynical Theories by Helen Pluckrose and James Lindsay. And I've left a extensive review for this book on my blog if you're interested in more of my thoughts on it. But it's a really good. I want to say objective, but I mean, obviously, Pluckrose and Lindsay are very much against critical theory. And, maybe I'm rating it high because I find critical theory to be very sort of ill-posed, not well thought out, and quite frankly dangerous. It's kind of a dangerous ideology, and this book sort of illustrates that extremely well. So if it helps you understand the critical theories, while also pointing out why they're not good theories and why they are actually quite dangerous. So then I read this Cambridge companion to Bertrand Russell. I wasn't that crazy about that one. I think I'll put it in C. I don't know. It wasn't terrible, but I think there are probably better places to read about and learn about Russell's uh, philosophy. The Cambridge Companion of Gottlob Frege, I think I'm going to actually put that in S tier. I think when it comes to Cambridge Companions of Philosophers, this is sort of the gold standard here. This is definitely one if you're at all interested in the sort of the beginnings of sort of Western analytical philosophy and logic, particularly quantifiers and sort of predicates and predicate logic and things like that, then this is a really good place to start. And because Frege is kind of the one who sort of came up with, who's sort of the father of analytical philosophy. And so you can't go wrong if you are interested, if you want to know more about analytical philosophy and don't know where to start, then this is a good place to start. I read the Cambridge Companion to Wittgenstein. I think I'll put that in B. Probably another high B. It's good. I think it's a little bit shorter than the other two on here, but it's a good place to sort of whet your appetite for more Wittgenstein. I didn't know that much about Wittgenstein. I knew a little bit, but not that much before reading it, and it was because of reading this book that I actually bought some of Wittgenstein's actual philosophy works. I have not yet gotten around to reading them, but it's, I guess, kind of a glowing review to say that reading this inspired me to get more into Wittgenstein's philosophy, which I guess is sort of the purpose of these Cambridge Companion books. So I think I'll actually put that up to A tier. Now, actually, having talked that out. So then the rest of these are books about science, so physics books. I'm going to go even more quickly through these. So particles, fields, and forces. This was S tier. If you're somebody who really wants to know about things like quantum field theory and quantum mechanics and stuff at a deeper level without having to get too bogged down in the math, this is an extremely well-written book. It has lots of great pictures and gives just a really good intuitive sense for quantum field theory. Like I said, it's at a higher level than what you will get at sort of popular science books, but it's at a lower level than getting bogged down in the math. So very good descriptions in English, lots of really great figures and pictures and stuff. So if you are interested in that stuff, then I highly recommend that book. So the no-nonsense quantum field theory. So this is actually a series of 4 books, and I read all 4 of them. So I'm going to I'm going to include all 4 books here. So there is the first one you should read is the no-nonsense. Uh, classical mechanics. I think that's what it's called. Yeah, classical mechanics. So that one was really good. There's the no nonsense. Forget. Yeah. So quantum mechanics is the second one. Then the no nonsense electrodynamics, and then the fourth one, which is the by far the longest of the 4 books, which is the no nonsense quantum field theory. So I thought the one on classical mechanics was, if it was just looking at that book, I'd probably put that in S tier. The quantum mechanics one was good. I thought its description of Dirac notation at the beginning left a little bit to be desired, but once you got into sort of the meat of quantum mechanics, it was definitely a really good one. The electrodynamics was really good. That one I'd probably also think about putting in S tier. The quantum field theory one I thought wasn't as good as the prior 3. It seemed, I don't know if it was the length or I don't know. It seemed to sort of, it was a little bit harder to understand. I think it wasn't as it didn't seem as intuitive as the other 3 books. But if you want an introduction to quantum field theory, and by the way, these are all very, very math heavy. So it's not like this one where it's more intuitive with lots of pictures. These are extremely math heavy, so don't buy these unless you want to sort of grapple with the mathematics of things like classical mechanics and quantum mechanics and electrodynamics and quantum field theory. And I think that's maybe where the quantum field theory one was not as good as the other ones. It seemed to lean even heavier on the math without sort of explaining as much what the math is talking about. You know, this author also has some other good books. So Jacob Schwarzenberg, I think. So he also has another one that's that talks about gauge symmetry and tries to sort of use finance as an analogy to talk about gauge theory and explain what gauge theory is. That one was okay. And he has another one that's called Physics from Symmetry, which is all right. It's once again the Physics from Symmetry. It's sort of marketed as this, well, this is, the book that'll teach you about, quantum field theory if you don't know anything about quantum field theory, and that may be true, but it doesn't explain things like group theory and Lie groups and stuff all that well, in my opinion. But these no-nonsense books are by this author are definitely worth looking into if you are interested in getting into these subjects at a mathematical level. And so then there was the Leonard Susskind Theoretical Minimum series, which I think I'm going to put in B tier. So I didn't think these ones were as good as the no-nonsense ones. They cover, so there's 3 books in this series. There's the one that's on classical mechanics, one that's on quantum mechanics, and then one that's on relativity. And so you are getting relativity in these 3 books, which you do not get so much in these no-nonsense books. But I didn't think they were written as well. So it seems like it was trying to, be both sort of casual while also being, mathematical at the same time. And so I don't know. It didn't work for me as well as these no nonsense books did. So I am, when it comes to a lot of these physics subjects, I am a self learner. So I took, like I took a freshman level physics in college, and I got through the one semester version of physical chemistry as a chemistry undergraduate. So my my physics background, as far as my education goes, was not that great. So I'm always looking for books like the no nonsense, like the theoretical minimum, like this particles, fields, and forces, as a way to teach it to myself. And so yeah, these are all books that I read this year. I've since bought and have started reading sort of higher level textbooks on this subject. So I have the J.J. Sakurai textbook and the so the Griffiths, yeah, the Griffiths book. I also have bought, but I have not yet read the Feynman lectures on physics. So those are all the kind of, I guess that's the kind of what level of, things like quantum physics uh, and general relativity. I got the general relativity by Sean Carroll and the gravitation books, which I've looked through, but I haven't read from cover to cover yet. But that's sort of the level that I'm butting up against as far as my physics knowledge goes. But anyway, I definitely recommend, particularly the no nonsense and the particles, fields, and forces. Those are really good books if you are interested in increasing your knowledge beyond sort of the popular science level. But anyway, this is my tier list for the books. Well, at least some of the books that I read in 2020. Uh, yeah, let me know what you think about my list, and if there are. I'm definitely looking for more science fiction that can maybe be into the A and maybe even S tier. So if you have recommendations for that, then feel free to leave those in the comments. And I will see you in another video.